Happy Monday, everyone. Hope you've had a wonderful weekend. This week, we'll be getting back into some sciencey research. I found a really cool paper that's only come out this year that is looking at the direct impacts of strength during a 156K ultra marathon. So the research team actually were measuring the runners on course. So the race itself was designed by the research team as opposed to them going to a race and trying to convince people to be part of their research program. It was in reverse. And some of the effects that they found in strength degradation were crazy. And it's the first time this has ever been researched in isolation in these type of controlled settings. So really excited to get into that. But first, I just wanted to express I guess my appreciation for my clients that were out racing yesterday at our local event here in Brisbane, the Guzzler. So if you're not aware of this event, it's now in its 8th year. We've got distances of 10, 21K, 50K and 100K. It's a really challenging course, both the 50 and 100K. There's, I think, 2,500 vert in the 50 and 4,500 vert in the 100. I've done both, so I know what those guys were going through yesterday in the 50K. One of those was on debut, and it was just so cool to see different experiences play out in real time again. So someone who's never experienced that 50K and all the unknowns that come along with that, to be there sort of following along. And unfortunately, the course itself, it's great for the runners as far as the trail experience is concerned. There's only like 2 road crossings, I think. There's no runnable road sections. It's all trail the whole way. It's amazing. But when it comes to being a spectator or a coach, it's really tough. You only get to see them at the first checkpoint, the first aid station, and that's it. So there's no crewing or anything as a 50K runner. Only 100K runners get any sort of crewing. So you see them at the 18K, and then you say, all right, man, I'm gonna head home for a couple hours and I'll follow you along on the live track. And there's not even live tracking as far as GPS is concerned for the 50K. They've just got the next checkpoint. So as they come through that timing gate, it just updates and gives you their split. And there's some pretty long splits. So you only get a couple on the way up throughout halfway in the 30K mark, and then you don't get another one again until like the 47K mark. So you're sort of seeing what that pace is looking like at the 30 and probably leaving half an hour or 45 minutes after that. So I made sure I gave myself plenty of time, and yeah, the guys did great. They were very happy. The debutant, he was bang on sort of where we hoped he would be in such a difficult, challenging race. He hasn't raced anything close to that sort of vert profile before. It's come from shorter distances with, less than 1,000 vert in those races. And yeah, came out with a time of just over 7.5 hours. And another client of mine, he knocked 50 minutes off his course time last year. So he wasn't working with me this time last year, came on board after that race, said he absolutely hated it, never thought he'd sign up for another one again. And he's done 250s this year and made massive leaps and bounds. So it's so cool to see people go and execute on some of the advice that you give and the practices that you're trying to inform yourself as best you can as a coach, knowing full well, as I talk about so often on this podcast and all my other content, that in the grand scheme of things, when it comes to ultras, we still have no idea what it is that really shifts the needle, when it comes to nailing down the perfect preparation for an individual. There's no one size fits all. As we've spoken about in the past, the 50K, you can isolate it down to like VO2 max to a large degree. So as long as you're pushing that ceiling and getting your speed work in, you're going to give yourself every opportunity. But what I really enjoyed in talking to one of my clients yesterday who was on debut was his experience about the descent. He really started to slow after quite a long descent into one of the reservoirs there at Gold Creek. So there's 2 bodies of water that you run across for the 50K and 3 for the 100. So when you come to the second one, it's about a 2K descent in, and then you come back out of that again. And he was a little bit slower getting out of the climbs. he was fast getting out of the climbs. On the descents, he started to slow from the splits that I saw. And straight away I was like, oh, he's starting to feel the pinch of the accumulative fatigue from descending. And that's something that I go on about all the time, from last week's podcast, talking about vert gain. And that's not the only thing you should be concerning yourself with. But what I spoke to him about yesterday after the race was, his peak weeks were, only around 70 odd Ks for a couple of weeks, which is pretty low volume when it comes to preparing for an ultra marathon. And it's why the elites can run so fast, because their total weekly volume is so much higher than that. But I also said, given your experience, what you were able to achieve versus what you did just really pushed up against the limit of your current experience. And I don't think that's a bad thing. And if you've never really experienced that race before, you're never going to know what the limit of that looks like. So I think it just goes to show that you need to be putting yourselves in these situations where you are actually racing, and to not always just look at the race itself as like this big, hurrah, grand finale type scenario around your training, but it's also additive to the next training block and races that you're going to be working towards in the future. Not just from an experiential side of things, but also like a physiological stressor in a positive way. So if you can get yourself in enough shape to handle all that load, then absorb that becomes a really positive stimulus in of itself. And having spoken to him today, he's like, oh, I actually pulled up way better than I thought I would, even though I was hurting quite a bit as I got to that finish line. So it's crazy, all the different things that lead to the fatigue, which we're going to get to in a second, of talking about this research paper that basically reflects everything that he was experiencing, and why strength itself isn't just one sort of finite component of, I guess, a performance additive, and that absolute strength itself isn't something that's going to be this magic solve as far as a race performance is concerned, that it is multifactorial, and the things that lead to that fatigue aren't necessarily based on the strength work that you've put in alone. So yeah, again, anyone that was out there racing, congratulations to you, whether it went good or bad. I've spoken to a few friends that had some rough experiences in the 100K, and you never like to see DNFs and even results that, aren't ideal when you do finish a race, but it wasn't the time that you wanted. But even now, sitting in my DNF for a couple of months from Cape to Cape, you just realize that everyone is going to eat a DNF, and that they are there for a reason. They're all teachable lessons. And I think it just goes to show that you've either pushed up against the limit of what you're capable of, and that's a positive thing, to know that you have, I guess, the courage, for lack of a better word, to want to go to those sort of depths. But then okay, well, what do I need to now change? So it's just carving the path for the next training block, which should actually come as a relief. You know exactly some of the things that you want to work on now. And if you find yourself in the basket of, I have no idea what I need to be working on, I don't know why that happened, then maybe you need to go and consult a coach, or go talk to other runners that have got results that you want, and seek out some of their experience, and see what little nuggets of gold that you might be able to apply to your own sort of training. So there's always something to be learnt, no matter whether it's a win or a result that we didn't want to go our way. So congratulations again to my guys. Super proud. It was the first time that I'd been out there as a coach / spectator. Every time I've been there before has been as a competitor. So it was really cool to just really soak it in and see the finishing shoot and everything that was going on there with all the music and the different brand stalls, and seeing everyone come in celebrating their wins. And while I remember it too, the results from the 100K race, we actually had, give me 2 seconds. Okay, we're back. Third place overall in the 100K, Jemima Cooper, a female, took it out She broke one of my favorites, Holly Ranson's course record by a couple of minutes. And I haven't really stumbled across Jemima too much. Just a brief look at her socials tells me she's a Pommy expat and an ex-ballerina who has found herself in the ultra running world and destroying. I believe it was her 100K debut and only her 4th ever ultra. And she's gone and smashed a course record and got herself onto the podium overall. So first female, 3rd overall. Insane. Like the fact that these results for women in the sport are just becoming more and more common. I think it's such an attractant to have a level playing field. I guess for me, I'm most excited because I have a daughter. So to be involved in a sport that is actually garnering the success, and it's done in a way that is absolutely earned by these women. Everything they're putting in, they're getting back out. And it appears at least that there's enough variables within ultra racing itself that it's denouncing a lot of the sex differences that we see between men and women in so many other sports, and that strength in alone is not enough, that VO2 alone isn't enough. So, I'm sure we're going to keep, I hope that all these results that are coming are going to spawn a whole heap more of research to try and get to the bottom of all this, because it's so fascinating to see, and there's just such cool personalities. I don't know what it is about social media, but I think in the ultra running world, at least, the chicks seem to have so much more personality when it comes to anything on social media. I enjoy watching a lot of those. Not that I don't follow any guys. I enjoy watching Hans Troyer and David Roach's content, even Kilian Jornet, to have one of the greatest to do it. Be putting more stuff out online has been really cool as well. But yeah, the chicks, man, they've got so much personality, humility, and I think just drive. So someone who's got a daughter, it's super inspiring to see them, really driving everything forward and progressing the sport. So now I want to get into this research paper that I was talking about at the start of the show. So as I alluded to earlier, it was a 156K race that was looking directly on the strength and power degradation of ultra runners in real time. So the name of the paper was Profiling Measures of Muscle Strength and Power Throughout a 156K Ultra Trail Running Event. This was written by Markov and colleagues and was released this year, as I said. So they created the event. It was, as we said, 156Ks, 6 loops, 626K loops with 1,000 vert gain and loss. So it was just repeatable loop after loop. And at the end, so they had pre and post measurements. So they measured everything 12 hours after the race. But then at the end of every 26-kilometer loop, they measured knee extensor strength, so your quads, isometrically, so using a dynamometer, grip strength, so they just had a little squeezy hand tool, and then also vertical jump. And they measured the power output from force plates as well as the jump height itself. So 4 measures that they had there. And across the event, there was 55 runners, the usual sort of skewed mix between men and women. I think it was 43 men and 12 women at an average age of 45 years old. And at the end of the 156K event, there was 14 DNFers, so just over 40 finishers. What they found was that the strength decrease across the entire race was 41%. So that measurement of knee extensor strength, quad strength decreased by 41% at the end. And that didn't matter where you finished. So whether you won it or whether you came dead last. And there was a really good array of running ability as well. From memory, I think the winner came in around 17 and a half hours, and the last finisher was like 34-hour mark. So a really good representation of competitive running and those that are like just busting their gut to get it done. And to see that there was no noticeable difference in strength in those guys that finished, a strength loss, I should say, was really, really interesting. And another thing, the only difference that they did find was between finishers and non-finishers. So there was a 27% difference in absolute strength. So where the caveat of that lies, and it's nothing to really write home about or take too seriously, was the fact that I think 4 people pulled out on the 5th loop, and they were all women. So when you account for that sex difference and you neutralize it with body mass, pretty much disappears. So it's going to be interesting. I think there's more room in research in the future to actually delve into that, because, you know, a sample size of 55, cool to look at as an event. I think it's pretty standard for a 100-miler to have, you know, a field that small. But if you could reproduce that, maybe not only at just a single event, but just organize multiple rounds of that across Europe or something like that, or across the US, where you could replicate those same settings, and then have a look if there is anything noticeable, regardless of sex, in that strength degradation, or is there, you know, a noticeable difference for men versus women, or vice versa. So I think there's some really interesting questions to be asked there. So it's not so much that, you know, does being strong truly matter for performance? No, they didn't find that. It didn't matter how strong you were. You all lost strength at the same rate. But what that shows us is that it's not necessarily happening locally, because in the 12 days post, it had bounced back by 27%. So a lot of it is neuromuscular, something central that is causing that fatigue, that breakdown to start to occur. So it's not happening at the muscular level, or not only at the muscular level, I should say. Which, again, it's the hard part with ultras, right? It's all multifaceted. The big glaring variable that was left untouched here was the training and nutrition processes. They were free to do whatever it is that they wanted. They were just looking to control those measurements throughout the race. So every time they came in, they actually stopped the timer. They got through all that battery of testing, started the timer again. So it didn't affect their finishing time if they were sort of coming in with other people and had to wait an extended period of time before they got tested. Don't believe they showed if there was any major queuing for that. You wouldn't suspect so in a race of just 55 people. But yeah, that was something that they didn't account for, which is obviously a massive variable that would affect your strength loss as well. So could we see something where strength is preserved, knowing that it's not just happening locally, that it's happening with central nervous system? We know that carbohydrate intake can affect those sort of things. We know that electrolyte profiling is going to help those sort of things. So I wondered if we standardize some sort of nutritional strategy, whether we would see anything start to arise there. Hand strength didn't change whatsoever, but one caveat to take on board there was that they banned trekking poles. So, you know, 6,000 vert for a, let's just call it a 100-miler with no poles, brutal. And this was in France, I believe. So you better believe that, you know, there was some gnarly, tricky terrain to get across there that wasn't just, you know, fire trails like we have here in Brisbane. So it would be interesting to know if hand strength would decrease significantly if trekking poles came into it, and whether that would help attenuate any strength loss across that race as well. So that would be another interesting control, would be to have a group that use trekking poles only and then measure them against non-trekking poles. So many questions. That's the funny part about research, right? The more questions that you try to answer, the more questions you end up creating, which is cool. It's just going to continue to push everything further forward in the research. And when it came to power, it did decrease by about 20% as well, 25%. But the interesting thing was it started to rebound and almost increase again towards the last couple of laps. And they were simultaneously writing another research paper for this event, and it was looking at the cross-sectional area of the Achilles tendon. So what they found was a thinning of the Achilles tendon, particularly for those that were running faster than 8 kilometers an hour. And then when that race continued to endure into loops 5 and 6, and they retested it, the Achilles tendon, actually the cross-sectional area of it, increased again. So there was some like swelling in there basically. And they didn't measure tendon stiffness specifically. They were just looking at cross-sectional area, but they did hypothesize that the reason for that increased area was that essentially everything at the start, you're optimizing for power output because you're naturally fresher. So you're moving better, moving faster. And then the back half is no matter what sort of shape you're in, right? 100 miler is 100 miler. So your body is just like in self-preservation mode. So to reduce stress is force divided by area. So if you increase the area and force remains constant, stress will decrease. So a really interesting way of the body looking to preserve the tissue itself and basically make sure that you don't rupture your Achilles tendon. So if that does prove to be true, what a really cool way that your body naturally just deals with the shit that you are putting it through. So I don't know if we really, out of the back of all of the research that they did accumulate, come up with anything that's really going to shift the needle on training practices. But it was interesting to note that it didn't matter what your racing ability was, that strength degraded at the same rate. So there has to be other factors that are attenuating that strength loss. And I think seeing the rebounding in strength so significantly in that 12 hours post probably paints a little bit of a picture into some other variables, like I said, between nutrition, hydration, pacing, on what that looks like on the other side. So yeah, I really liked the fact that it was finally a paper that took control and that they were able to even get people to sign up for something like that. Because you can imagine a lot of people when you're doing these things, you know, it's all based around the time, right? So knowing that you have to go into this, you know, testing battery throughout the race, how many people want to go and do like a max vertical jump during a race? I imagine some people will be like, oh no, I'm going to like rupture my Achilles if I try and jump and land or something like that. And it also makes you wonder, how committed were these people to actually put in a maximal voluntary contraction during a race? You know, how much motivation was there? What were the, you know, study designers doing? Were they there encouraging them, trying to fire them up? Or, you know, was it sort of blasé? That would be interesting to know as well. What sort of environment were these runners walking into when they were asked to take on these types of tests? So it will be interesting to see what these researchers have in store next, whether they're looking to try and replicate something similar again, and what changes they're looking to make. So yeah, a multifaceted game, but just know that strength degradation, it just goes to show that so many other factors go into what becomes a successful race. And the puzzle itself, at least for me personally, is the biggest attractant. That nothing is guaranteed. You're essentially trying to learn, like I said at the top of the podcast, from what went wrong. You're trying to diagnose it, and then hopefully you guessed right and you can make those proper adjustments. But I think more and more is just going to continue to become uncovered as we learn more from people at the top, and I think people like us as well. I was having this conversation with someone the other day as well about, yes, it's always really cool to follow the elites, but I wonder how much of what they're doing, when we're talking about something at scale, when it's like time, how differently do you need to approach a race strategy if you know that you're going to take 10 to 15 hours longer to run 100 miles, if you're going to take 4 to 6 hours longer to run a 50K? What differences do you have to make? What adjustments do you have to make? And I don't think we truly know. Like, are you better off spending more time on feet as someone who's slower, essentially assuming that you want to spend closer to the amount of time that you're going to be under duress because you can't generate the intensity that an elite is going to. And that doesn't mean that you're going to race like that forever, but is that an adequate strategy for someone who doesn't come from a running background? I at least found that anecdotally for myself. Again, there's so many constraints that go into preparing for an ultra and what you are or aren't willing to put into the preparation. For me, when I was preparing for my first 50K, I didn't have any kids yet. So I was quite happy towards the top end of my 50K prep before I first attempted one on my own, was like an 8-hour hike. That's all I did. And then I slowly just built that up to, okay, well, I'll just jog the flats, jog the descents, and then just hike every ascent. And that was essentially my first ever 50K. So that built a really good strategy for me because it was enough time on feet. I ended up hiking longer than what it did to run my first 50K. So again, I don't think there's any perfect way. Would I go and do that again? Probably not, because knowing what we know about that 50K distance and trying to improve your VO2 max, probably could have reduced the time and not spent so much time away from my wife hiking and just put a bit more effort into some speed work. And still obviously pay attention to building up that intensity as my ability allowed me. But I also think that it's easy to go too far the other way and think too low intensity. So yeah, it's going to be a fascinating time to see this world of ultra, and I'm sure I'm just going to repeat that same message week after week, to be honest, as I continue to go through and uncover all these different research papers that I become obsessed about. I think they're so cool. I hope that I'm presenting them in a way that's somewhat interesting to you as well. And if there's any qualifying questions that you have, by all means, either just like DM me or comment on any of the reels that I put out there, or email me. I'm always happy to have some discourse back and forth. But all I wanted to finish the potty with was a little bit of an update leading into the Scenic Rim 100 mile. So I'm less than 3 weeks out now. And unfortunately, at the end of last week, I developed a niggle in my ankle, in my foot. I believe it's a little bit of tendonitis in my perineum. I'm not really sure what or why it happened. The only thing that I can really think of was I was meant to have a speed workout on the treadmill that was on an incline at 8 to 10%. And I don't know, in my early morning stupor, I just ran it flat. So obviously it's at a higher intensity than what you're going to be running at for an 8 to 10%. So you're going to be getting more volume in that as well, covering more distance. And then I followed that up with another a strength session straight into a trail run the following day, where I'll usually do maybe some cross training or just some hiking or something like that on the treadmill. But just based off what I wanted to get done with what I was hoping would be a peak run before I start my taper, obviously sort of pushed me over the edge in that 72-hour period and pissed something off in there, to the point where it was actually waking me up. So just the weight of the quilt on my foot was waking me up. I was in quite a lot of discomfort, couldn't really get into a comfortable position at all. I've done what I believe is the smart thing now, and that's to go into recovery salvation mode. This isn't about when can I squeeze in that next long run. It's let's get to the start line. And the reason I've come to that conclusion is this race for me, it's not an A race or a B race. This is my opportunity to get some qualifications for races in 2027. So unfortunately, because I didn't even get to the finish line at Cape to Cape the other month, I don't have anything behind me should I wish to enter maybe some multi-day events, which I'm very, very interested in, just the psychology behind it. And I know that sounds crazy as someone who didn't even complete a 100 miler. You're like, Ben, how can you be thinking about going multi-days when you haven't even finished 200 milers? So I'm hoping to hit the meatloaf in 2 out of 3 isn't bad. And that will give me some groundings to be able to potentially enter some other races next year, at least domestically. I really want to get overseas and race. I don't know what race in particular. The US, Colorado in particular, has a calling to me. I've got some clients there that I would love to meet in person that I've been coaching for a few years, and they've echoed those sentiments and that they would love to crew me. So there's that incentive to get over to that part of America, and obviously it's trail running mecca over there. Some of the best runners in the world not only come from there, but move there to improve their running capabilities. So yeah, whilst it's frustrating, I'm actually dealing with it a lot better than I usually would in these states. And I think it's just having that ability to zoom out and be like, okay, why am I running Scenic Rim? And just leaning into a lot more of the positive like community factors. Like, it's not only is it only an hour away from where I am, it's the first time they've ever run this event. So I get to support a local race. I get to meet new people, others that are there to support local, meet the race directors. It's just run by one family, a guy and his wife and their kids, and they clear out what is, as far as I'm aware, about 50% of the races on private property. So you only get the opportunity to run this when the event's on. So I'm really leaning into that it's a unique opportunity to experience trails that not only have I never experienced before, but that I don't get to experience outside of this race. It's not like I can just say, oh yeah, I'll go back and try that section again. So I'm just really looking forward to that. And then there's obviously the challenges within the race. 5,800 meter vert profile is daunting, coming off the back of prepping for Cape to Cape, which was barely 3,000. And then you've got unrelenting sort of just up and down. There's no real flat runnable sections. I think the biggest challenge is going to be the lack of crewing that you're allowed at the front half of the race. So there's 40 Ks where I'll go unassisted, and one of the aid stations there is just like a water refill station. So there's no nutrition for 40 Ks afforded to you. So that is a really big logistical challenge. You know, how much fuel do you take with you? What sort of fuel is that? Because you're getting that at about 25 Ks in. So you're still going to be pretty fresh, but 65 Ks in is still deep into an ultra, even though you've still got another 100K to go. So you've got a lot of troubleshooting that you're gonna have to sort of, I guess, wager against, which I'm looking forward to trying to solve in real time. And then there's the race start. It starts at 3 a.m. So you're already coming in with compromised sleep, but then I'm trying to shift the mindset in my head that, well, we get that 26K loop done in darkness, so it's not going to be overly hot or anything like that. You can pretty much rule that out, especially in that part of the state. It's generally a bit cooler anyway. So, you know, hopefully conditions are pretty good. There's no wet weather around and we don't get stuck in any sort of bogs or anything, and we can move through that front section without any heat stress. And then, yeah, tackle that next 40K solo as best we can. So I'm looking forward to all those processes. I'm trying not to overthink anything about what I need to do from here on out. It's just make sure that I get there healthy and happy and looking forward to race. So I'm not overcomplicating anything now. It's just, yeah, look after me, keep the head intact, and just get out there for all the right reasons. You know, there's so many people that, you know, will never get to experience what I get to experience when I front that start line. You know, whether it be through illness, injury, disability, whatever it is, you know, there really is so many ways that you can look for gratitude in these situations. And it's something that I probably don't do enough. I try to do it as often as I can. But I think anytime that we can sit in those times of reflection, it's always a positive time. I don't think I've ever sat in there seeking gratitude and being like, this was dumb, this was a waste of time. You've always found something that's like, shit, like I really do need to stop and enjoy this. And that's something that actually one of my clients said to me yesterday, who PR'd by almost an hour, was even though there were some things during the race that didn't go the way that he wanted to, he was still super grateful because he got to enjoy yesterday. Whereas last year he said it was an absolute sufferfest and he really didn't think he'd ever run an ultra again. And now he's going to run 3 this year. So I've been stoked to be a part of that turnaround process. And it just goes to show that a good night's sleep can make you do some crazy fucking things, which is like signing up for 100K when you've only just got through a 50K. So I think that's all I got for you today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the potty. If you have been enjoying what I've been putting out, please, subscribe to the channel, whether it's on YouTube or Spotify. Share any of the clips that you see with your friends, tag me and stuff on your stories. Any way that we can help spread the word truly does help shift the thing. It's very, very busy out there now in the age of social media. So breaking through to new audiences isn't always the easiest thing to do. So if I can ask that one simple thing of you, is that you just, give it a share with someone that will seek some value if you are finding value in it yourself. Otherwise, have a wonderful week, and I shall be back next week. There is also some exciting news that I'll be sharing soon about my first ever guest on the podcast. I may have mentioned her name already in this podcast as a massive hint. So stay tuned. I'm ironing out a few bugs, but within the next few weeks, you should see a podcast with a ultra running legend in Australia. All right, gang, have a great week, and I'll see you at the next one.